Welcome to The Standard. From Vancouver, I'm Peter Klein. Tonight, Ezra Levant. He published those controversial Danish cartoons depicting Mohammed when he was at the Western Standard magazine. Now he's on a one-man crusade to abolish the human rights commissions that went after him. But first, the Prince of Pot is free on bail and awaiting extradition to the United States. Marc Emery is here in studio. In September of this year, marijuana activist and seed seller Marc Emery entered Canadian custody to await extradition to the United States. He is expected to serve a 5-year prison term for selling marijuana seeds by mail to American customers. This past week, he was released on bail. Marc Emery joins me in studio. Welcome.
Thanks for putting me here.
Well, let me ask you first, what did you do that day that you got out? What was it like?
Well, it was a bit surreal because I went out as soon as I was released, and there's a lot involved in that. It took two and a half weeks before we got our bail after first applying for it. And I went out to the vigil. There's a vigil outside of North Fraser pretrial for 45 days on my behalf, 24 hours a day, and rain, cold, sleet, snow almost, and the occasional sunny day. There were people there, 6 tents built around kind of a little mini city there. They had their own drainage ditch, a porta potty, a heater, a propane heater. Somebody had donated a leather couch. They've got a pavilion roof on top. So it was just a full-time vigil on my behalf. So I was really honored to see that when I got out because I'd only heard about it.
You went out there to thank them?
I went out there to thank them, and that was a wonderful moment, being with the people who are hardcore devotees to my cause and my freedom. So the fact that there were 2 people there who were there the whole 45 days who organized it, wow. Krista and Dylan. So, you know, that kind of support's heartwarming, both while I was incarcerated and afterwards, because I'm hoping my American supporters can do that when I'm sent to a U.S. penitentiary in the United States, and I'm hoping we can generate similar devotion from my supporters wherever I may end up.
I have to ask you, because I'm sure some viewers are going to be wondering, presumably you had no access to marijuana for the 52 days you were in prison.
It's a maximum
right?
security
right.
prison remand, so you have incredibly heightened sense of security. When I was in Saskatoon Correctional, eventually I was moved out to a work farm where it was very easy to smuggle in marijuana. Mm-hmm. And people did try to do that, and they usually even got caught under such even routine circumstances, and they add more time onto your jail sentence once you're convicted. And you would be sent to really heightened security, and it's already maximum security. I was never able to go outside. I was locked in my 8x10 cell, 20 hours on weekend, 18 hours during the week. So I had to be really busy with my brain in order to stop from going buggy. So I wrote extensively and I read extensively, and I tried to take advantage of any quiet time I had to read, write, and keep my mind fit.
Well, I want to ask you more about in your time in prison in a moment, but when you got out, did you smoke that day? I mean,
I probably did. I didn't smoke in public. I wanted to make a point of not doing that because you're on bail. You're supposed to remain of what they call good character. I was even in traffic. It was a rainy night. Traffic was dense. It took about an hour and a half to get downtown, and even that was enjoyable because one of the things that you're aware of in maximum security is that there's no decisions available to you. Your food comes at a certain time. There's nothing really optional to do with your time, and it's just nice to have independent thoughts once you get out of jail that you can act on some of your thoughts.
Now, we're doing this interview on Monday. Show's going to air on the weekend, and you may be back in prison by then. But explain to our viewers why you're out now. You didn't actually have to be in for those 52 days, did you?
No, my lawyer thought, well, you may as well go to jail. It'll toughen you up, for one thing, because it's maximum security, but you'll be in Canada, and you can talk to your wife on the phone.
So you could put that credit of days towards your American sentence.
Yeah, and that's the thing, it's 52 days, and it also applies to my U.S. sentence. So on a 5-year sentence, that would be, you have to serve at least 85% in a U.S. jail, so that'd be 4 years and 3 months less. The 2 months here is down to about 4 years and 1 month. And that would be at the maximum end if I spent every day in a U.S. penitentiary or U.S. prison system. That's what the total would be. My hope is that I'll get transferred back to Canada and out on day parole or full parole within a year and a half, 2 years.
Right. When you were in prison, did people recognize you? Were you a celebrity in jail?
Everybody treats me nice in jail that are inmates. I've never met an inmate that I didn't get along with. And most of them treated me slightly special. Like eventually they would bring me food that I liked. You know, that I would often make a fruit salad for myself every day, apple, orange, and banana, which were, you'd get these once or twice a week, one of each, but a lot of the inmates would just give me their apple or their banana or their orange. So, and because I like to think of myself as a nice person, I'm a generous-hearted person, talking, listening to them, you know, giving them food, or they were all very nice to me in return. I actually must say that all the inmates were quite civil, and all the guards that worked there were quite professional. I have yet to encounter a guard in our prison system that ever acted unprofessional, not just to me, but to anybody. I've never seen what I would call abusive behavior by a guard to an inmate in any of the civil disobedience I've been involved in. I've been arrested and put in jail in 8 out of 10 provinces, and I served a 3-month sentence in 2004 for passing one joint in Saskatoon, and 52 days here, and I've still yet to see unprofessional behavior. So it's nice to know that Canadians have a good work ethic when they work in the prison system.
Now, you have characterized this, and certainly your supporters have characterized this as a political, some have even called it a witch hunt, that you've been pursued for political reasons, not on purely legal reasons. There are other people who have done similar crimes as you who have not been pursued quite the way that you have been, right?
But there's a combination of factors at work that put a target on me. First of all, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I gave away $4 million from 1994 to 2005 to all sorts of North American groups, putting ballot initiatives in Arizona, Nevada. I gave $25,000 to a Nevada initiative to legalize medical marijuana in 2002. Something that recently came to pass that I paid for is that Washington, D.C. now has a medical marijuana law that was originally passed in 1998 with money I donated and paid for all the petitioning and signatures, but the Congress blocked it with something called the Barr Amendment in 1998 and did not repeal the Barr Amendment. Yeah, Bob Barr, who's actually someone I know now on a similar wavelength. He's quite reformed and become against the war on drugs. So they repealed the Barr Amendment 6 months ago, and now Washington, D.C. has a medical marijuana law that was largely paid for by a Canadian such as myself. So the money I gave away to the American legalization movement was substantial and effective. And the DEA, in combination with the fact that, you know, I heckled John Walters when he came here, the drug czar, in 2002. And so I was, you know, on everybody's radar as someone who's giving a lot of money away to these groups to fight the drug laws, and I was selling seeds to all over the world to people to raise that money. And of course, I thought that was a perfect revolution called overgrowing the government. You know, they send me money, I would give the money away, and then people would be growing lots of these plants to make themselves self-sufficient, wouldn't need to buy from people in the inner cities or from organized crime. So this all worked out great. And basically, my whole point is that you should not be going to jail for any peaceful, honest lifestyle choice. And to me, marijuana is a peaceful, honest lifestyle choice. It doesn't matter if some people perceive it as harmful to oneself, because everything that's legal is harmful. I mean, drinking tap water can kill you if you lived in Walkerton, Ontario, and we have aspirins, tobacco, alcohol, fast cars, guns, all fatty foods, salt, pepper, sugar. It'll all kill you, and in quite large numbers in cases of like sugar and salt, and yet these things are all commonly available and there is no risk attached to them. You don't buy a bag of sugar with any warning on it, but it's the leading cause of death in Canada, that sugar. And obesity is our #1 killer. Tobacco is #2 now.
Right, well, I want to ask you about some of the criticisms that have been lobbied towards you, and in a moment we're actually going to be joined by your wife Jodie, who has been part of that vigil that you mentioned, and really has been fighting for on your behalf. In just a moment, we'll be joined by Jodie and Mark as well when the Standard returns. I'm back with marijuana activist Marc Emery. Currently out on bail, he's awaiting extradition to the United States, where he's expected to serve a 5-year prison sentence for selling marijuana seeds to Americans. Joining Mark is his wife and editor of Cannabis Culture magazine, Jodie. Welcome.
Hey.
Jodie, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Mark that first day. Describe to me, what was it like? What did you do? Keeping in mind this is a PG show.
Well, it was exciting, but I never really think anything has happened until it does actually happen. So I'm always waiting for some sort of bump to get in the way or some sort of bureaucracy. But we got there and they said, well, just wait downstairs. So I waited there with my friends, and we're looking through the door and it's getting dark and rainy out there. And Mandy, my friend who drove me out there, she goes, oh, look, there he is. And we ran out the door and he's being escorted by a cop, and just ran right up to him and just held him and cried and kissed him, and it was just wonderful being there.
Strangely enough, much to my surprise, normally you'd think sex would be a priority after 52 days, but mostly food was. And I never actually missed sex in jail. I eventually didn't miss anything but being beside Jodie. I was so used to spending every waking moment of our life, 24 hours a day for 5 years at least, beside each other all the time. So when I spoke to her, it was wonderful hearing her voice. And what I really missed was the presence, just being beside her, like we are all day long. And then the first physical thing I really took advantage of was food. I think I ate at 3 restaurants the night I got out, just trying different kinds of food. Fish and chips the first time. And
Those fruit salads weren't enough in prison.
Well, the thing is, it's the same 3 fruits in 52 days, just apples, oranges, and bananas. So I love the look of a kiwi fruit, a mango. I was going all crazy.
And it was really wonderful bringing him to the vigil, as he said, because it was very emotional. A lot of people had been there every day, and they wanted to keep staying there longer, but we said, no, you can go home for now, but we might need their support again in the future.
What's nice is that everybody on the street's been remarkable, and I always have had a very nice reception throughout Vancouver and much of all my life here. But since I've been out, people have been particularly kind and wishing me the best, and somehow, having been away for 52 days, they can imagine that, well, it must be difficult to be the prospect of being away for 3 or 4 years, maybe, you know, because 52 days was clearly difficult for Jodie to do, and I watched her on the news the nights I was in jail, and it seemed difficult for her, and speaking to her, knowing that she has to run a business, campaign for my release, and our business has 20 employees, and you know, it's a lot for her to take on, getting my release, keeping the campaign to free Mark going, as well as run a business for 20 people, and do that alone, because we've, like I say, we've been together for 5 years, day in and day out.
Well, you mentioned the vigil. A lot of the people who have been outspoken supporters of yours are pretty young people, and you really do have sort of a galvanizing quality, and you know, you advocate for the rights of someone like you, who's, you know, a 50 or 51-year-old person to smoke. But a lot of people who are smoking pot are 15. I mean, how do you reconcile that? Does that concern you that you know, underage people are smoking pot as well, and some of them see you as a hero?
Well, I'm glad they see me as a hero, and their decision to smoke marijuana as opposed to anything else is a correct decision, because marijuana is the only thing that won't kill you. You're not going to drive dangerously on marijuana. You're not going to take your friends'
So you don't
lives in
have
their
a
hands.
problem with someone driving high?
Well, first of all, I've driven all my life, never had an accident, and I think marijuana, once you're used to marijuana, not the first time you take it perhaps, but once you've smoked marijuana frequently like I have, it attenuates you to your surroundings. I don't believe you're impaired when you smoke marijuana. If we're going to have a discussion and somebody insists that you're impaired smoking marijuana, we will never agree on anything, because I don't believe I'm impaired. I believe that my consciousness is raised, my senses are more attenuated, so that I'm more aware of my surroundings,
And
not less aware.
impairment is based on
Performance. If you're not
so-
performing, then you're impaired. But I've never had an accident. I've never driven dangerously. In my experience, you're very attentive to the speed limit when you've smoked marijuana. You're very attentive to passengers that you're responsible for in the vehicle, and you tend to drive very conservatively. So the idea that people are impaired when they smoke marijuana exclusively, I think, is false and wouldn't apply to me.
And as for young people using marijuana, a lot of them do start younger, but it's probably better than drinking alcohol. For example, I tried alcohol the other night, and it was an awful experience. It made me very sick. And a lot of young people should be able to have that choice to use something safer. But also the Canadian Senate recommended legalizing marijuana, and they said as young as 16 you should be able to make that decision. But again, it's also young people, they want to use it because it is illegal, because it's the cool thing to do.
And the reason parents object to marijuana use by young people is not because it's unhealthy, it isn't. It's because you talk back when you smoke marijuana. The reason marijuana is illegal, not because of health implications, it's because it creates critical thinking, dissenting opinions. It means you start rejecting the dogma. As soon as any young person smokes marijuana, they realize that their parents have been lying to them, their teachers have been lying to them, the politicians are liars, the priests are full of mumbo-jumbo, and the cops want to put you in jail. And so all the authority figures you're told to respect, and then you smoke marijuana, and then you realize it's all hypocrisy. They're all enforcing these selective laws. I mean, why do the people who smoke marijuana go to jail and not the people who drink alcohol or smoke tobacco, much more dangerous substances, right? So the person who smokes marijuana sees the enlightenment, sees a sort of self-awareness come upon them, all this knowledge they begin to have, and yet at the same time now they're subject to going to jail for that very same enlightenment. So marijuana people are quickly aware of a hypocrisy in society that punishes them, but not others.
Well, let me ask about the business, the seed business. Are you keep continuing that
No,
going, or
the
that's
seed
on hold?
business stopped in 2005 when Mark was first arrested, so we haven't had anything to do with seeds.
I can't even talk about seeds theoretically, let alone sell them. So we haven't done that for 4.5 years.
So the business that you're continuing,
Is our retail storefront, Cannabis Culture Headquarters, and we sell hemp clothing, hemp lotions, pipes, bongs, and glassware, a lot of
clothing.
books, movies, yeah.
so has someone filled, I mean, presumably there was clearly a market for seed.
There's 5 seed shots on our block.
So people have filled that void.
Well, and people are selling marijuana seeds in the United States, and in fact, as you pointed out, there are other people in Canada doing the exact same thing, and they're not being extradited. And that's what's most offensive about this, is Mark carried out his seed business here in Canada at all times. He paid taxes to Revenue Canada. Health Canada knew about what he was doing.
And recommended
All of Parliament knew what he was doing. It was widely known. And as soon as the police in Vancouver couldn't get him charged here in 2003, they asked for the United States, or worked with the United States, to have him charged down there. And
Well, when that was starting, that was during the previous administration, during the Bush administration, which sort of advocated that whole war on drugs. Barack Obama has at least given lip service to being more open-minded about drug laws and loosening drug laws. Were you initially sort of hopeful that somehow an Obama administration would go lighter on you? Is there a chance that it could happen?
Well, first of all, there's a chance that change can happen with the Obama administration. With George Bush, John Walters as drug czar, the DEA, Alberto Gonzales as Attorney General, we're all working to stop any modernization of the drug laws. Whereas President Obama has indicated he won't get in the way of change. So if change happens in the Congress or at the state level, he'll accept those changes, which the Bush administration wouldn't. Well, that's very important because a lot of changes are happening at the state level. California is on the threshold of legalizing marijuana for all adults. That will change the paradigm when a state of 40 million people is taxing and regulating marijuana and sold to everybody. And there's a lot happening in the Congress. Ron Paul, the greatest congressman ever, and Barney Frank have a bill to legalize marijuana for adults and has 70 co-sponsors. Not enough yet to pass it. But things are happening in a way that aren't happening in Canada. In Canada, we have a lot of new crime bills that we're going to put more people in jail for a lot longer periods of time and raise the cost to Canadians of an American-style prison system.
Well, we're out of time, but thank you both for joining us, and enjoy your time out.
I am, thank you.
Coming up next, he was brought before a human rights tribunal for publishing those cartoons depicting Mohammed. Now he wants the tribunal's silence. He'll explain why next. Welcome back. In February of 2006, Ezra Levant published several controversial cartoons that originally ran in a Danish newspaper, depicting images of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. The aftermath saw him and his magazine, the Western Standard, which is no longer in print, brought before the Alberta Human Rights Commission with a charge of offense. Mr. Levant has now documented his experiences at the proceedings in a new book entitled Shakedown: How Our Government is Undermining Democracy in the Name of Human Rights. I recently had a chance to speak with him here in Vancouver. Thank you for joining us. You made a decision that I think a lot of people would consider controversial, to publish the Danish cartoons. Was that a tough decision for you to make?
It was actually surprisingly easy. We were an independent news magazine, and our motto was telling it like it is. And here was an interesting news story that was actually the largest story in the world for a few weeks in February of 2006. Sure. Almost 250 people were killed in riots about these cartoons. I mean, when I was a kid, cartoon violence was the Wile E. Coyote throwing an anvil at the Roadrunner. But cartoon violence, killing people? So as a magazine that liked to be really frank and talk honestly with our readers, we thought, well, we've got to write about this, and let's show what the fuss is about.
But nobody else ran the cartoon in Canada.
That's right. I
mean, you really stood out there.
Now, there's hundreds of different newspapers in Canada and TV stations, but they're actually not all independently owned. In fact, between Can West Global, Bell Globe Media, CTV, and Sun and Quebecor, there's actually only 5 big companies that run 90% of the media in Canada. So 5 guys in Toronto made the decision, yeah, it's a little spicy, we don't need violence here, we don't need property damage, let's just skip it. So I don't think it was hundreds of ordinary journalists making up their decision on their own. And I think that a lot of journalists in Canada sort of wished they had covered the story.
Well, in your book, in fact, you even mentioned that there were polls that showed about 70% of journalists supported your decision, right?
Yeah, Compass did a huge poll of journalists. Now, I don't blame other publishers for not publishing them, because the job of a publisher is to run a business and maybe make some money. And if you've got 30 offices around the country, like some of these companies do, that's a lot of security costs. And, you know, are you going to spend $1 million in security just to run a story? So I understand it and respect it. What was odd to me is the excuses. No one would say we're afraid. People came up with excuses that, oh, it's not newsworthy. Well, clearly it was. Or, oh, we suddenly respect religion so much that we'll never poke fun at one. Come on. So we were a little independent magazine, and we didn't have these problems. We did hire some security, but it didn't bankrupt us.
Right. But did you expect that there would be a reaction?
Well,
you must have known that some people are going to be upset about it.
Yeah, we were a little worried. Like I say, we hired some security and put in a steel door. Nothing happened by way of violence.
Well, what was the reaction to
The
that
reaction was a media frenzy, and I think part of it was the media working out their own issues that they couldn't write about it. So this was a sort of a surrogate way for a lot of reporters to talk about it. And, you know, we ran a lot of letters to the editor, pro and con, including by Muslims. For example, one great letter to the editor from a Muslim woman named Rawa Khalid basically said, I didn't leave a Muslim dictatorship to come across the ocean to have Sharia law follow me. Wow. I mean, she came here for freedom. We also ran letters from Muslims saying you shouldn't have done it because it was offensive. Okay, that's an opinion.
But there was one imam who actually took his complaint to the authorities, right?
That's right. I debated him. His name is Syed Sohrawardi, born in Pakistan, educated in the madrasas, does the Saudi lecture circuit. And the morning our magazine was running off the presses, so they hadn't even been mailed out yet, I debated him on CBC Radio in Calgary about the cartoons. He said, you shouldn't publish them. I said, well, it's a free country. We have separation of mosque and state here. If you don't like it, don't read it. He went to the police and asked them to arrest me. The police refused, but he went to something called the Alberta Human Rights Commission, which is a government agency. And you'd think with human rights as their middle name, they would respect freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, but they didn't. They actually prosecuted me for 900 days. They charged me with hate speech, and I did an access to information request, and I discovered they had 15 people, 15 bureaucrats and lawyers on my case. I like to joke I was a stimulus program for lawyers or something. That was crazy. So the government went after me for 900 days for publishing a magazine article. And they actually interrogated me for 90 minutes. They called me downtown and asked me questions about my political views and my religious views. And to me, that's so un-Canadian. I mean, I think that we should have laws against inciting violence, let's say. But if you have a political opinion that's peaceful, you're not calling for the death of anyone, and you just have a very strong opinion, you should be able to say it, even if it's crazy. And the government was telling me that there were certain things I couldn't say. That's what offended me.
Well, so what happened with that case? There was actually recordings of that interrogation, as you put it, on the internet, right? On actually.
Yeah, I brought in a little video camera because I just knew that if I went into a government interrogation, and seriously, an officer of the government asking me questions as a journalist, that we've never seen that in Canada before. That's something we think about the Soviet Union or maybe China or Iran. I just knew that if I went through that and emerged on the other end just with some crazy stories, people would say, yeah, are you exaggerating? But if I brought a videotape in to show it, to show what censorship looks like in the 21st century in Alberta, then people would be shocked. And I took a video camera in and I taped the whole interrogation, and I went home and I put it up on YouTube. And my plan really was to email it to 50 friends, and I thought maybe a few thousand people will watch it. That weekend, more than 100,000 people watched my interrogation. It was the 5th most watched video on the internet. Since then, almost 800,000 people have watched it. Now, when you turn the sound off, nothing could be more boring, like a bunch of people sitting in a room talking. But when you listen to it, you say, oh my God, is that a government agent asking a journalist about his political and religious opinions in Canada? And if he doesn't answer right, he could be convicted of hate speech? That got so many people, it shook them. They thought, this isn't the Canada I know and love. And believe it or not, within a week, so many people had written and phoned the Human Rights Commission that my interrogator quit my case.
You know what, let's take a look at those videos?
I state to you, I published it without reservation. I published it in the most unreasonable manner.
Sorry, what do you mean by unreasonable manner?
Whatever offends you, I reserve the right to publish it for whatever offensive reason I want. I see in these hand-scrawled complaints, especially by the Saudi-trained imam, that he's offended that I'm, and the Muslim Council from Edmonton, that I've offended the Prophet Muhammad. Well, he's dead, by the way, so I don't think I've offended him. But I reserve the right to have done exactly what they accuse me of doing. I've given 100 interviews where I said what I actually was doing. But my answer in response to these two fascists, the one trained in Saudi Arabia and the other one piling on, is that I reserve the right to publish those cartoons for exactly what they complain about. Now, they still put me on the paces. Like I say, it was a 900-day investigation. But in the end, they threw out the case against me because of the public backlash. Now, the trouble is, I'm free, although I was out about $100,000 in legal fees. But the law is still on the books. And that law is here in BC also. And I think it's an un-Canadian law. I think that freedom of speech is a Canadian value. Even if it's rough speech, even if it's rude, the answer to rude speech is to ignore it, turn the channel, or if you're really mad, rebut it, write a letter to the editor, not to call 911.
Today, for instance, in Germany, you can't display a swastika. There's laws on the books.
And I think that's an outrageous form of censorship.
Welcome back. Lawyer and author Ezra Levant is no stranger to controversy. Dating back to his days working with Stockwell Day and the Canadian Alliance to his tenure as publisher of the Western Standard magazine, he has not hesitated to speak his mind, as I found out. Other countries, journalists in other countries did publish the cartoon in the United States. There are a couple places that published it. Was there a similar reaction in those countries as there was in Canada?
As far as I know, not a single other journalist in the free world was charged with an offense for this. Not even in Denmark, where the original cartoons were issued. Not anywhere in Europe. Not in America. And you're right, a few papers did. Not very many. The Rocky Mountain News, Philly Inquirer, you're right. I was the only person in the free world to be charged with an offense. Actually, one of the cartoons ran in Cairo, Egypt, a 90% Muslim country. He didn't get charged. So here in Alberta, which I like to think is one of the freest provinces, and it opened my eyes to this whole subterranean quasi-judicial system is what it's called. It's like a parallel legal system where the same rules of court don't apply, the rules of evidence don't apply. Quick example, if someone were to charge me with a crime, I'd get a free lawyer in legal aid. Not so here. If someone were to charge me in civil court and lose, like this imam did, he'd have to pay my costs. Not so here. The government. Right. I mean, there's so many ways in which the legal process was wrong. The censorship was wrong. That's the substance of it. But the process was wrong too. And speaking as a lawyer, I can say I've never seen anything so bizarre and un-Canadian as the rules. It was like a lawless bear baiting. It wasn't a real court case.
As you say, you won the case. Do you think the fact that you took that camera in and posted the video contributed to the decision?
Absolutely. That's the only reason I was let go. Here's the exact wording of the law under which I was charged, and you can imagine I've memorized it. It's against the law in Alberta and BC and federally. There's 14 of these human rights commissions, right, by the way. It's against the law to publish anything, quote, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. Likely to, that's sort of another way of saying maybe in the future. Expose a person to feelings. Well, of course, I guess I'm guilty of maybe exposing someone to someone else's feelings. I guess I was guilty. In fact, until this September, this particular law, this hate speech law, had a 100% conviction rate. No one in the 32 years the law has been on the books federally or provincially, no one had ever been acquitted. How can you be acquitted of maybe causing someone to have feelings? Like, that's not even a real crime. That's not even a thought crime. That's an emotion crime. And I'm not saying I like being angry or making people angry, which is against the law, but if you never feel anger in your whole life, you don't have a full personality. It's to try and criminalize feelings. If we could do that, we would just pass the Love Each Other Act and we'd all be happy campers, but that's not how humans work.
But you acknowledge as a lawyer that you probably should have been convicted based upon the wording of the law.
In fact, in my video clips that I put on YouTube, I basically plead guilty. I say, I've done everything you accuse me of doing. The only difference is I think that's my right to do so. And look, I'm not saying we should all go around being as offensive as we can be. I think there's room for politeness and courtesy, but I think the solution to people who are rude, even to people who are racist, and I don't think these cartoons were racist at all, and certainly we didn't publish them in a racist way. We said, here's the news.
But wait, let's go.
Sure.
I understand you published them as this is news, it's led to riots and
Yeah.
deaths, but Mohammed with a bomb in his turban,
Yeah.
that's not racist in your mind?
I think it's political commentary. It's political commentary on the fact that many radical Muslims do terrorist acts in the name of their religion. That's a fact. I mean, there are terrorist groups like with the name Islamic Jihad, like that's what they're called.
Right.
And they say it's in the name of Islam. Obviously, the vast majority of Muslims are not terrorists, obviously.
So, I mean, could you see how an average Muslim who has no intentions of ever doing terrorism would find offense at an image like that?
I could see how some would, absolutely. Now, very many didn't. I could see how some would, but here's the answer, and here's my point. I mean, if you walk outside your house, you're going to be offended by something. I mean, every day, let's say if you're Catholic, the Da Vinci Code is offensive to some Catholics. Woody Allen has made a career out of mocking Jewish neuroses.
But that's different. Woody Allen is Jewish. But, you know, in Nazi Germany, there were many cartoons that depicted Jews
Sure.
with hook noses being, miserly and stealing money.
Right,
would you consider that? I mean, would you defend the right of the German Nazi regime? Obviously, there were a lot of things they did that were wrong. But would you defend the right of a journalist at that time to publish a cartoon that's derogatory towards Jews?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even though today, for instance, in Germany, because of the legacy of where that political commentary led to, you can't display a swastika. There's laws on the books.
And I think that's an outrageous form of censorship. Frankly, that's something Hitler would do, to ban an idea. Here's what we do when we encounter something racist or bigoted. Now, quite often, we don't do anything. We just ignore it. If we're mad about it, we stop and correct it. If someone tells a racist joke at the office, say, whoa, that's not how we roll here. I want you to stop. I mean, that's a little bit of a personal involvement.
Right.
If it's on the radio or TV, letter to the editor, a boycott of someone's advertisers, and if you're really steamed, have a campaign. Run for office. There's so many natural responses. I call them peer pressure. Take David Ahenekyu. He won the Order of Canada. Now, he said a terribly racist thing. He's an Indian chief in Saskatchewan. He said Hitler was right or something like that. Well, he's a 70-something-year-old grandpa. What's the right approach? Probably ignoring him. But if you're really mad, rebut him. Prove that he's wrong. And frankly, you want to strip him of his Order of Canada and other awards, that's fine. But don't criminalize his ideas, and that's my point. We should have the right as Canadians to have bad ideas, to have dumb ideas, even if racist ideas. Now, we should pay the price socially. If my magazine really was racist for publishing these cartoons, what would have happened? I would have lost subscribers, lost advertisers, my board might have fired me, people wouldn't invite me over for dinner anymore because I would be impolite company, and all of that I would have accepted. What I can't accept is the government saying, we will tell you if your idea is right or wrong. I say, shut these human rights commissions down, and Canadians will just plain old get along with each other. We're doing it right now.
Welcome back. Ezra Levant has characterized Canada's human rights commissions as political correctness police, who, he says, pursue frivolous cases like his. In your book, you take issue, beyond just your case, in general, with this whole concept of this human rights tribunal. Yeah. Is there an analogy in other Western countries? Is there one in England, in Australia, in the U.S.?
The U.S., because of their very strong First Amendment rights, they don't have the same sort of political correctness. Now, they do in some areas. Some campuses, college campuses, have speech codes, but they don't have government human rights commissions with the vast powers ours have.
You talk in the book about what you consider entrapment, where members of these tribunals actually go on websites of different hate groups and essentially incite hate to lure out other people who might, spew things that would violate the books, right?
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the, I've discovered so many crazy little things when I was trapped in the system. And when you're being prosecuted for 900 days, you start to do research and say, well, who are these guys? And the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which is the biggest one of Canada's human rights commissions, they've got about 200 staff. Some of their staff actually join neo-Nazi organizations. Fill out membership forms, join, and get an internet nickname, like Axe to Grind was one of them. Then they go on websites in the States, like there's a US website called Stormfront. It's a neo-Nazi website, I think it's based in Florida. So you've got Canadian Human Rights Commission staff, public sector employees, joining neo-Nazi groups and going on this Florida-based website saying vicious anti-Semitic, anti-black, anti-gay things. I remember some of them. One of them is white police should be loyal to their race. We should have an all-white city. Jews are scum. Gays are a cancer on society. Like, these are really outrageous things. Now, I don't think any of those things should be illegal, by the way. They're extremely rude. They're bigoted. They're hateful. But I don't think you should be thrown in jail for being rude. But this is the government. These so-called anti-hate speech people are doing this, and when they got a reaction, then they would charge the other guy with hate speech. Well, to get those few cases, the government had to actually make hundreds and hundreds of hateful comments themselves. That's crazy time. That's Alice in Wonderland. I mean, if there's so little hate out there that the government has to create it in order to justify their existence, I think it's time to shut these guys down. Here's a statistic that I find very encouraging. In Alberta, year over year, the number of complaints to the Human Rights Commission fell 15%. In Ontario, it's fallen 4 years in a row. Now, why is this interesting? Because over time, our country's more and more multicultural. And the fact that we're multicultural, but we get along better than ever, like we really get along better than any other country in the world that's not racially homogeneous, like, say, Japan. It works. We've got a black woman as the Governor General. In this province, Ujjwal Sanj, a Sikh man, was the Premier. Very, very diverse. Vancouver, very diverse. And it works. Do we really need these 14 human rights commissions hunting for reasons to be mad at each other? They are doing it to justify their bureaucracies. Human rights industry is a $200 million a year industry. 1,000 bureaucrats in Canada make their living off it. And if they can't find hate or dissent, they're going to go stir it up. It's a moral hazard. I say shut these human rights commissions down, and Canadians will just plain old get along with each other. We're doing it right now. You
take issue with a couple cases. There was an employment case, a McDonald's case in BC, that you took issue with in your book. Tell us about that case.
Sure. Just on Southwest Marine Drive, the McDonald's there was a woman who worked there who, at McDonald's you have to wash your hands all the time. Like any restaurant. You handle food, you wash your hands, you handle money, you wash your hands. This woman named Bina Dat one day said, I can't wash my hands so much, it hurts. So McDonald's put her on long-term disability leave. They kept paying her while they tried to find a solution for her hands. They took her to dermatologists and allergists. Nothing worked. So after almost 3 years of paying this woman not to work, they finally said, look, Bina, you're in a restaurant. You got to wash your hands. If you've got something wrong with your hands, go find another job. Here's your settlement. Here's your termination pay. We tried for 3 years. There is not a single job in this restaurant that doesn't involve handling food sometimes, even the boss. So they let her go, and believe me, they paid her 3 years to do nothing. She turned around and sued them. Not in a real court, because that's not wrongful dismissal. You're not following the hygiene code. You're not washing your hands. No court is going to give Bina Dat money for that. That was not wrongful dismissal. She went to the Human Rights Tribunal here in BC, and they awarded her $50,000 tax-free. This is a woman who was making $9.75 an hour. 50 grand tax-free, but that's not even all of it. They ordered that McDonald's on Southwest Marine Drive never to enforce their hand washing rule on anyone with Binadat's problem again. Now that's not just gross, that's dangerous. And there's no basis in law for that. So, I mean, when you...
In fact, I mean, I looked at that case, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they even said that there was no conclusive scientific proof that washing hands prevents the transmission of
Which
germs.
is crazy, because hand washing is the number one...
Right, well, certainly these days,
Yeah,
that's
I
all
mean,
you hear about.
Walkerton,
with,
for example. I mean, E. coli and being clean food preparation. Let me ask you this. When you think of human rights, are you like me? You think of Martin Luther King, you think of Nelson Mandela. I don't think that if you ask Nelson Mandela, what's a human rights case, he's going to look at this woman at McDonald's who doesn't want to wash her hands and say, yes, that's what I spent my life to fight for, her freedom not to wash her hands. That is not a human rights case. That is a nuisance suit that the Human Rights Tribunal rewarded. The reason why that woman went to the Human Rights Tribunal is because if she went to a real court, it would have been thrown out and she would have had to pay costs to McDonald's. These human rights commissions, like the censorship cases are not the majority, they're a tiny percentage. But those little shakedowns of companies, that's why I call my book Shakedown. Binadat had a shakedown at McDonald's for 50 grand. And there's too many cases like that. And McDonald's didn't do anything wrong, in my opinion. In fact, they were so generous to this woman. These human rights tribunals have got to go. They are now a bigger problem than anything they claim to solve.
More of The Standard next. Welcome back. If you have a comment about our discussion with marijuana activist Marc Emery and his wife Jodie, or if you have a question about my interview with Ezra Levant, we'd love to hear from you. Here's how you can reach us. That's our program for tonight. For everyone at The Standard, thanks for watching. I'm Peter Klein. Good night.